Pablo Hevia-Koch and I'm the acting head of renewables integration and secure electricity at the International Energy Agency. What we're seeing today is that electricity is becoming the beating heart of modern economies. We're seeing not only a growth of electricity demand, which is driven by electrification, typically of industries like steel or the agricultural sector, but also by new sources of electrical demand. And that means creation of hydrogen through electrolysis, as well as the growth of electric vehicles, electric mobility in general. And this means not only that we're seeing much higher levels of electricity demand, but that the nature of this demand is changing. And that means that both the operational patterns as well as the geographic location of these sources of demand are changing in time. At the same time, what we're seeing is a significant development of new sources of electricity, particularly wind and solar PV. And these sources of electricity are quite different to the sources of generation that we had in the past. In the past decade, we've seen that renewables, particularly solar PV and wind, they went from being only a few percentage points in total final electricity demand to being over 10% globally. And looking towards the future is going to be much, much higher. And that means that the power system's nature is changing very quickly, but the grids that are connecting both generation and demand and finally bringing electricity to consumers need to keep pace. And it's under this framework of rapidly changing electricity supply and demand where grids need also to accelerate in being able to be fit for purpose. So in order for grids to develop at the speed they need to develop to be aligned with our climate targets in time and in full for each country, we need to see a significant acceleration of their length. In the last 20 years, grids have been growing by roughly 25 million kilometers. In the coming 20 years, we need to see 50 million kilometers of new grids, both at the transmission and distribution level. But not only that, we also need to modernize and strengthen 30 million kilometers more, which means that in total, in the coming 2 decades, we need to see 80 million kilometers of grids being strengthened or created around the world. And this is roughly 2,000 times around the Earth. It is a significant length. Well, today the topic of grids is gaining attention for different policy makers around the world. We need to see a significant acceleration in investment globally. And that means that we need to bring investment yearly in grids from $300 billion per year, which has been stagnating around for the last years, up to more than double, exceeding $600 billion per year. So the nature of finance depends quite a bit on which part of the world you're looking at. What you're seeing is that in some emerging economies particularly, investment in grids not only has been stagnating, but it's actually been decreasing over the last few years. And these are the countries and regions around the world where you need to see the most growth in grids, because they are enabling access to electricity, because they're enabling economic growth. For these countries in particular, the financial situation of their utilities tends to be a barrier. And for this, there needs to be work on driving investment, both by improving the way these companies are remunerated, but also finding concessional and targeted finance that can support grid development where it is needed. What we have seen in this COP is that grids are becoming more and more important in the agendas of the different countries. There was a COP28 presidency event that highlighted the role of grids, both at transmission and distribution, as an essential step for enabling secure energy transitions. Now, the challenge here is that this growth needs to take place in a sustained manner over the coming years. And for this, a global approach could be good for driving the necessary investment, but also more than investment, ensuring that the right policy framework, the right planning methods, as well as the necessary regulatory improvements are created so that grids can be scaled up at speed to be fit for purpose. So both transmission and distribution grids are key parts of the power system that need to work together to bring the power from when it is produced to where it is consumed. But as new sources of distributed generation, as well as distributed resources like batteries, take higher levels of importance, the relevance of distribution grids becomes more and more important. Even further so, they are a key enabler for the access to electricity in emerging economies that needs to follow both economic development as well as increased access and population growth. For this reason, when we're looking at how much grid length needs to expand, we will see that most of this growth most of those 50 million kilometers that need to be created in the coming 2 decades needs to take place at the distribution level, not only to ensure electricity access, but also to enable distributed resources like solar rooftop PVs, as well as batteries, to deliver all the value they can to the system and the citizens.